You know the kind of town where everyone knows everyone, where the local diner serves coffee in mugs stamped with your name, and everyone will lend a hand to a neighbor in need. A place where generations of families grew up together. Well, that is the sort of place where I live. Sure, it is a bit rustic. Hell, I barely have reliable internet, but it is nice enough for us. It's the kind of place where time feels like it's standing still, except for one thing: the nights. The nights here are a little different. I've lived here all my life, and there's no place I'd rather be. Or at least, that's what I used to think. This place has its quirks, like any small town, but there's a big one that stands out for us. You see, every night, without fail, at 11:38 p.m., the town locks down. I'm not talking about just closing up shops, and less people being out and about. I'm talking about a real lockdown. Doors slam shut and are barred, windows rattle and lock, and everyone knows they have to be inside and stay inside, at least for what happens next. The next part is strange. No one ever sees anything moving out there directly, but we all just know. We just know that somehow something outside is trying to get in. An eerie silence falls over the streets. It's like the whole town is holding its breath. Then in 12 minutes exactly, it is just over. I've always wondered why it happens at exactly 11:38 p.m. People here don't talk about it much, but when they do, they whisper. They say it's just the way things are, that it's been happening for as long as anyone can remember. But I know better. I've seen it. Whatever it is. The first time I noticed it, I was still pretty young. I think I was 10 or 11. I'd stayed up late reading some of my favorite comic books. My parents warned me, like many other kids in town, that we had to go to bed early, but if we did get up, then absolutely no leaving the house or leaving any windows or doors open. I was not asleep, but was still following the rules. When I heard the strangest sound, it was a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I looked out the window, and that's when I saw it. The streets were empty, but there was a presence. It's hard to describe. It wasn't a person or an animal. It was something else. Something that didn't feel like it belonged. It moved with this strange, jerky motion, like it wasn't entirely in control of its own body. It radiated a disturbing sense of distortion that made my head hurt, and my eyes had a difficult time focusing on it. I could feel this overwhelming sense of hunger that made my skin crawl. Before I knew it, it was over. It had passed my house, and I realized I had been staring out my window in a hypnotic daze. It was almost midnight, and I went to sleep and did not tell my parents about the disturbing thing I had seen. I didn't see it again for years, but the feeling never left. Every night at 11:38 on the dot, when the town shuts down, I know it is there. We all try to act like it's not. Just behave like we have a strict curfew, and that nothing is really out there. Yet the people who are too bold or foolish and think that it's nothing, well, they don't last long. Those of us who are still here know that whatever that thing is, it's out there. Stalking, hunting, looking for anything. An open window, a cracked door. Disappearances are frequent, especially for such a small town. The police have a whole song and dance for anyone who goes missing from the outside. But when it is a resident, well, it is more of a case where the families of the victims are reprimanded for not having known better. No one knows why the window of time is so mercifully brief. Almost just as suddenly as it starts, it's over. By 11:50 p.m., the streets are quiet again, and the town feels normal, but it's not normal. It never was. People here have learned to live with it. They lock their doors, shut their windows, and pretend it's not happening. I asked my parents why we don't just move, and they never gave me a good answer. All they said was, it wouldn't do any good. We have to endure. It has to be here. It is safer for everyone if it's here. It did not make sense. I know people can get attached to places, but it felt crazy to me. I couldn't just pretend this was normal. Not after what I saw. Not after what I felt. There was something out there, and it was worse than anyone would believe. It was just recently that I saw it again. It was a normal night, at least as normal as nights could be in my town. I was getting ready to go to bed when I noticed that my cat Quincy was missing. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find him. Then I heard something and looked through the window to spot a familiar shape, and my heart sank. He was outside. He must have gotten out when I had come home earlier and was sauntering along the sidewalk, clueless to the impending danger. The time was 11:36 p.m. I had no idea if the creature did anything to animals. but I did not want to find out. I had never let Quincy outside before, and he did not come back to my shouted calls for his return. I had to do something dangerous and stupid to save him. I rushed outside, sprinting toward him and trying to grab him and bring him in before it was too late. I managed to reach him and pick him up, but then I froze when I sensed a presence as I was scrambling back to my door. Quincy's ears folded back and he hissed. I felt paralyzed, and then I thought I saw it again. It was different this time, larger and more overwhelming than before. Its presence seemed to fill the entire street, pressing against the houses like an unseen force. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, my breath caught in my throat. To my horror, it seemed to finally regard me. Quincy jumped out of my hands and ran back to my house. He had fortunately evaded whatever interest the thing might have had with him. The creature's head twisted unnaturally in my direction, its distorted features coalescing into more recognizable shapes. Staring into the grotesque visage forced a scream out of me as I beheld the blasphemous impossibility. I turned and sprinted away, screaming like a maniac, my heart hammering against my ribcage with such force that each beat felt like it might crack my chest open. The sound of its pursuit echoed behind me, a wet slapping noise like a monstrous jellyfish gliding across the ground. Its deafening roar filled the air, shaking the ground beneath my feet as I ran for my life. I did not know if I could get away. No one I knew had been outside and survived. I ducked into an alley, my hands shaking as I pressed myself against the wall. My breath came in short, sharp gasps, and I could feel sweat dripping down my face. I didn't dare look around the corner. I didn't dare move. And then I heard the harrowing screams. They sliced through the air, piercing and full of terror. My heart raced as I strained to see who was making them, but all I could make out were shadowy figures caught in the open. The screams were short, sharp, and then they were swallowed by the night. The deafening silence that followed only added to the fear weighing down on me. I stayed pressed against the wall, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The darkness seemed to come alive with every creak and rustle, amplifying my fear. I held my breath until I heard the sound of the creature moving away, and then, just like that, it was gone. But the eerie stillness lingered, haunting me even after the clock struck 11:50 p.m. The streets were once again quiet, but my nerves were still on edge. I stumbled back to my house, every step feeling like a race against time. Quincy waited anxiously at the door and bolted inside with me, seeking shelter inside. The horrible night had left me shaken, but grateful to be alive. Whatever that thing is, it does not belong in this world. It is not of this time or place, and its presence is so unsettling, it makes your mind ache just to catch a glimpse of it. No one can tell of its origins. Maybe they are lost in the depths of history. But whatever its history, it remains. Always there, lurking in the shadows every night without fail. At that point, I did the one thing you probably think everyone should have done by now. I left my hometown. I moved to the largest city I could reach to get away from it all. My parents did not approve. In fact, they tried to tell me I could not go. I was so desperate to get out of there that I had to sneak away in the early morning when they could not interfere. I never understood why we all stayed there and tried to ignore the eldritch nightmare that hunted us at night. It seemed so simple, and I felt better at first. The city felt alive with the hum of traffic and the distant chatter of people during the day, a cacophony that made me feel safe, anonymous. Indeed, I thought I'd left the nightmare behind, that the creature was just a memory, a relic of a past I could bury. My new apartment is a cozy studio on the 5th floor, with a view of the bustling streets below, high enough where looking out the window does not fill me with dread at night. Unfortunately, something happened last night that has shattered the fragile illusion of my peaceful transition. On the first night in my new place, I sat on the edge of my bed, flipping through a magazine to distract myself from the creeping unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. The clock on the nightstand read 11:28 p.m. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the creature was gone, that I was safe now. But the weight of the past lingered, a shadow in the corner of my mind that I couldn't shake. By 11:38 p.m., the city outside my window was eerily quiet. The usual sounds of traffic and distant music had faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness. I tried to focus on the magazine, but my eyes kept drifting toward the window, the darkness beyond the glass pressing in on me. And then I heard it, A soft, tentative tap against the pane. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, the magazine slipping from my fingers and falling to the floor. The sound was light, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill coursing through my veins. I told myself it was nothing. I was just being paranoid. But then it came again. Another tap. This time more insistent. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My eyes were fixed on the window, the darkness beyond it seeming to pulse with a life of its own. The tapping stopped, and for a moment there was nothing but silence. Then, a faint scratching sound, like claws on glass. My heart sank. I knew that sound. I knew what it meant. Slowly, with my legs trembling beneath me, I rose from the bed and approached the window. My hand reached for the curtain, hesitated, and then, with a deep, shaky breath, I pulled it back. What I saw made me freeze in terror. The creature was perched on the fire escape, outside my window, its twisted form silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its presence seemed to fill the room, pressing in on me with an unspeakable horror. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The creature's head tilted to the side, its gaze locked on mine, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. It was here. It had followed me. And then, as if in slow motion, its mouth opened, revealing rows of jagged teeth, and it let out a low, guttural growl. The sound shattered the paralysis that held me in place. I stumbled back, my voice finally breaking free in a raw, terrified scream. The creature's form seemed to blur and shift, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable darkness. And then, everything went black. I regained consciousness, and I know it is not over. There is no escape from this thing that has followed me. I consider what my parents had said when I asked them why we never moved. Then, with dawning horror, I realized the truth of their words. It is safer for everyone if it's here. They did not mean it was safer for us. They meant it was safer for everyone else. They knew the danger. They stayed to keep it there. Now in my ignorance, I have made a huge mistake. Somehow it knew I left. It has followed me here to a place where over 1 million people will soon know about its existence, and maybe more if it moves beyond that. I am so sorry for bringing it here. I didn't know. Please, for your own safety, stay inside between 11:38 p.m. and 11:50 p.m. By now it might not be safe wherever you are as well. I live in a town where everyone sleeps before 10 p.m. It has become some kind of custom now. People lock their doors, turn off their lights, and crawl into bed as though their lives depend on it. Even the stray dogs vanish into silence, and the world outside becomes still. As a kid, I'd ask my parents, "Why does everyone sleep so early?" They'd always give me the same answer. That's just the way it's always has been. But that answer never satisfied me. Why was it the way it's always been? What was so important about sleeping by 10 p.m.? My curiosity grew as I did. There was something wrong about the stillness of our nights. No one ever woke up, not even for a glass of water or to use the bathroom. Once they went to sleep, they were dead to the world until morning. I'd overheard whispers once. Conversations among the adults. "He broke the rule," someone had said. Never woke up again. They saw me listening and stopped talking. But the seed of curiosity had already been planted. What really happened after 10 p.m.? One night, I decided to find out. That evening, I followed the routine like always. Dinner at 7, TV until 9, and then to bed. But this time I pretended to sleep. I lay there with my eyes closed, listening as the town settled into its nightly stillness. At exactly 10 p.m., everything became silent. A silence so heavy it felt alive. I waited for what felt like hours, though it was probably just 30 minutes. Then, slowly, I opened my eyes. My heart pounded as I sat up, every creak of the bed frame sounding deafening in the oppressive quiet. I tiptoed to my bedroom door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty. I could hear the sound of my own breathing. Slowly, I crept to my parents' room to check on them. They were fast asleep. Their faces were calm and undisturbed. For a while, I just stood there, watching them. But as I turned back toward my room, that's when I felt it. A presence. Not something I could see or hear, but something I knew was there. The air grew colder, pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The hair on my arms stood on end, and my instincts screamed for me to run. And then I heard it. Why are you awake? I froze. My mouth went dry and my limbs felt like lead. But then I thought, it's Mom. It has to be Mom. I felt relief for a moment. But as I turned toward the voice, I noticed my parents' room. The door was still ajar, and I could see them lying in bed, motionless, breathing softly, asleep. If they were asleep, then who? The voice cut through my thoughts, louder this time with anger. Why are you not sleeping? You were supposed to be asleep. The sound was coming closer. My chest tightened as I turned the corner, and then I saw it. It wasn't my mother, not my father, not anything human. The figure was impossibly tall and thin, its skin stretched taut over its skeletal frame. Its face, or the space where a face should have been, was a void, a swirling black emptiness. It's all your fault, you should have stayed asleep. Panic overtook me, and I ran. My legs felt like lead, my breath came in sharp gasps, but I didn't stop until I slammed the door of my room shut behind me. The knocking started immediately, loud, violent, relentless. Each blow shook the door, and I pressed myself against it, tears streaming down my face. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. Silence. For what felt like hours, I stood there, trembling, waiting for the next sound. When nothing came, I thought it was over. I thought I was safe. I opened the door, and that's when I realized something was wrong. The world outside wasn't the same. The air was thick, suffocating, and the walls of the house seemed warped, their colors dull and faded. The clock on the wall caught my eye, and my stomach dropped. The hands weren't moving. It was 10 p.m., and it always would be. I don't know how long I've been here. Days? Weeks? Years? Time doesn't exist anymore, not in this place. The town is empty now. No parents, no neighbors, no life, just me. Wandering the streets, searching for an escape that doesn't exist. I haven't eaten or drunk anything since that night, yet I'm not dead. I should be dead. But I'm not. My body has changed. I've grown taller, impossibly thin. My skin stretches tightly over my bones, and my reflection in broken glass reveals the truth. My face is gone, replaced by a void, a black nothingness. I don't feel human anymore. The memories of my life before are fading. I've grown angrier with each passing moment, at myself, at the town, at everything. And then one day, I saw something. A boy. He was small, frightened. I watched as he tiptoed down the hallway, peeking into his parents' room. The sight filled me with rage. Why are you awake? The boy froze, his eyes locking onto mine. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't watching him. I was watching myself. And now, I understood. I had stayed awake, and now, I was the one who ensured no one else ever would. In the early 2000s, an entire town went missing for a year. There was no evacuation order, no natural disaster, no signs of struggle, just a quiet, abrupt disappearance. One day the town was there, the next it wasn't. Satellite imagery confirmed it. Roads that once led into the settlement faded into overgrown trails. Utility lines stretched into empty fields. Even the town's name was erased from state records, as if it had never existed at all. And then, just as suddenly, it came back. A surveyor spotted it first. He was mapping a new highway route when his GPS glitched, showing a location that shouldn't exist. When he followed the road, he found himself standing at the edge of a town that hadn't been there the day before. The streets were intact. The houses stood just as they had a year prior. Storefronts still displayed faded close signs in their windows, untouched by time or weather, but the town was empty. No people, no vehicles, no signs of life at all. The air smelled stale as if it had been sealed away. Doors stood ajar, revealing homes frozen mid-moment. Meals half-eaten, water left running in sinks long dried out. The school still had lesson plans scrawled on the chalkboards. Dates circled from the week the town vanished. Clocks hung on the walls, hands unmoving. All frozen at the same exact time, 3:17 a.m. The investigation that followed raised more questions than answers. Security footage pulled from nearby camera hard drives showed the townspeople going about their normal routines, until the final recording. A grainy gas station camera caught the last moments before the disappearance. At 3:16 a.m., streetlights flickered, the sky above the town turned a deep, unnatural black, and then static. When the footage resumed, the town was gone. Authorities tried to make sense of the town's reappearance. Soil samples, radiation tests, air quality scans, all normal. The case was quietly buried, dismissed as a mass evacuation event with no official explanation. The town was left to rot, a curiosity for urban explorers and conspiracy theorists. That was how the reports told it. Anyway, a mystery wrapped in red tape, whispered about in late-night forums and buried under layers of speculation. I still remember reading about this town, ever since I was little. The way the news reports buried it, the way forums dissected every grainy image, every hushed government statement. It wasn't just another ghost town, it was something else. Something wrong. And now, after a month-long journey, I've finally found it. The trees parted like a curtain, revealing the road ahead. Faded asphalt, cracked and broken, stretched into the town's outskirts. Buildings stood in the gloom, their silhouettes sharp against the overcast sky. The air was still. Too still. No wind, no birds. Just a heavy, suffocating quietness. I took a step forward. Gravel crunched beneath my boots. The silence pressed in closer. From where I stood, the town looked untouched by time. A gas station on the corner, its neon sign dark and lifeless. A diner with sun-faded menus still taped to the windows. A row of houses, their doors slightly ajar, as if waiting for someone to step inside. I swallowed hard. The reports said it came back exactly as it was. That no dust had settled, no decay had set in. But seeing it with my own eyes was something else entirely. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. I checked my watch. 5:42 p.m. If the stories were true, I had until 3:17 a.m. before I had to start worrying. I should turn back. I should set up camp outside, watch from a safe distance. But I've come too far to hesitate now. Taking a breath, I stepped over the threshold, and the town swallowed me whole. For the first few hours in the town, I explored every corner it had to offer. I wandered through silent streets, past street signs, still gleaming under the overcast sky, past pavement uncracked, untouched by time. The houses stood like perfect snapshots of the past front doors, left ajar, curtains swaying in the still air, as if someone had just walked out moments ago. I stepped into one home after another, moving through kitchens where spotless plates still sat on dining tables, past living rooms where televisions were frozen mid-broadcast, their screens unbroken but lifeless. Bedrooms were eerily intact, sheets still creased from where bodies had once slept, closets filled with clothes that smelled faintly of detergent, as if they had been washed just yesterday. Everything was pristine, preserved, paused. If this had been a living, breathing neighborhood, I would have been seen as a burglar, maybe even arrested. But there was no one left to call the cops, no one left to care. And yet, as I roamed through the town, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I continued exploring until nightfall struck, and I swear to you, every time I turned a corner I could see them. Just at the edge of my vision, a group of people standing perfectly still, watching. But every time I snapped my head around, there was nothing. Just empty streets, dimly lit by streetlights that shouldn't still be working. I told myself it was just my imagination. The mind plays tricks when you're alone in a place like this. Shadows stretch wrong. Shapes morph in the dim glow. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't alone. Now, if I were a normal person, I would have turned around and gotten the hell out of there. Any sane person would have. But unfortunately, I'm not normal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not crazy or anything, but I have something to prove. I could still hear my father's voice, clear as the day he first said it. Jack, give up on this dream, son. Go pursue a fulfilling future. He had told me one evening, watching me push my food around my plate, too lost in my own thoughts to eat. This town isn't real. Me and your mother, we're starting to worry about this obsession. His voice had carried something deeper than frustration. Worry. Fear. I barely looked up from my plate when I answered. The town is real. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I wanted to sound confident, like I had no doubts. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about proving the town existed. It was about proving I was right. Dad sighed, setting his fork down with a dull clink. Jack, listen to yourself. You're talking like one of those lunatics on conspiracy forums. There's no proof. There never was. That's because they buried it. I snapped, finally looking at him. His tired eyes met mine, the weight of years spent worrying pressing into the lines on his face. Every official report contradicts itself. The satellite images, the real ones, don't match what the public records say. Hell, even people who lived near it said the roads just stopped leading there after it vanished. You think that's normal? Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing between us. She never liked it when we argued. Honey, you think I'm crazy, don't you? My stomach was in knots. I could already tell where this was going. Dad sighed again, rubbing his temples. It's not about crazy, Jack. It's about moving on. About not wasting your life chasing ghosts. I don't know why you're so fixated on this place, but you have to let it go. It's not healthy. Healthy, that was always their word for it. Like I was sick. Like my need to know to understand was some kind of disease. I pushed my chair back, standing up so fast it scraped against the floor. You think I'm wasting my life? Fine, but I'm not letting this go. Not until I know the truth. And now here I was, standing in the middle of the town that supposedly didn't exist. They had been wrong. I had been right. But as I stood there, the darkness pressing in, that feeling of unseen eyes lingering at the edge of my vision, I started to wonder, had I made a mistake? I continued exploring, my heart pounding in my chest as the shadows deepened. The air grew thick with an almost tangible weight, and the town, still frozen in time, began to feel less like an eerie curiosity and more like a place waiting for something. As I drew closer to 3:17 a.m., something shifted. That nagging feeling at the back of my mind, the one that whispered I wasn't alone, grew louder. Those things I had seen in the corners of my vision, they weren't just flickers anymore. No, they were closer now. So close I could almost hear the soft shuffle of their feet on the untouched pavement, and I could see them. I could see them clearly now. At first I thought I was imagining it. After all, the mind plays tricks in silence like this. But no, they were real. And they were smiling. Not a normal smile. Not the kind of grin you'd give when you saw an old friend or shared a joke. This smile, this thing, it stretched unnaturally across their faces. It was like it was forced, stitched from one side of their mouth to the other, as if their lips couldn't stop curling, no matter how hard they tried to break free from it. And their eyes, God, their eyes, they weren't just blank or lifeless. No, they were pale in a way that made my stomach twist. Bloodshot, like they hadn't blinked in years, maybe decades. Their eyes stared at me, wide and unblinking, as if they had been stuck in place for the last 20 years, frozen, unseeing, until now, until me. I don't know how many of them there were. 3? 4? I couldn't say for sure. They appeared out of nowhere, stepping from behind lampposts, peering from behind the corners of houses, slowly inching toward me, their smiles never faltering. Their presence was suffocating, and every step I took seemed to pull them closer, like magnets drawing me in. I could feel my breath hitching in my throat. What the hell were they? My mind screamed at me to run, to get the hell out of there before they reached me, before they closed the distance. But my legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place. One of them took a step forward, and I could hear the creak of their bones, an almost imperceptible sound that made my skin crawl. Their smile grew wider, impossibly wide, and the corner of their mouth twitched with a sickening, inhuman joy. I took a shaky step back, but my feet felt as if they were glued to the ground. The darkness around me seemed to pulse, to throb with a rhythm that matched my panicked heartbeat. It was like I was staring at something that shouldn't exist, something that was never meant to be real. But they were. They were here, and they were waiting for something. Waiting for me to cross a line I didn't even know was there. The air shifted again, stale, thick, and I could feel it. The moment was approaching. I had moments left. 3:17 a.m. was closing in. I didn't want to be here when it hit, but there was no turning back now. It was around 3:15 a.m. when they finally spoke. At first, it was just a low murmur, something barely audible, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was unintelligible, a jumble of sounds that scraped against my nerves like broken glass. My skin prickled, and every inch of me screamed to run, to turn around and leave this godforsaken town behind. But then, as the clock ticked closer to 3:17, their voices began to clarify. In perfect, chilling unison, all of them, those pale-eyed, bloodshot creatures spoke. "Jack, you're gonna join us. There's no getting out." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My breath caught in my throat, a cold shiver crawling down my spine. How the hell did they know my name? I staggered back, my feet slipping on the cracked pavement, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. There was no way they could know me. They couldn't. They were just things stuck in time. Ghosts of a town that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. But they repeated it, over and over, each of them speaking in perfect harmony, their voices twisted and warped, yet unmistakably clear. "Jack, you're going to join us. There's no getting out." It wasn't just a warning, it was fact, etched into the very air around me, the way they said my name. Jack, it wasn't just recognition, it was ownership, as if they had always known me, as if they had been waiting for me. I stumbled back, almost tripping over the curb as I tried to make sense of it all. Who were they? What were they? Why did they want me to join them? And was I the first one, or had they taken people before? The smile stretched wider on their faces, those unnatural grins that seemed to grow with every passing second. And their eyes, those dead, lifeless eyes, never left me. They were watching, waiting, and all I could do was stand there, rooted in place, paralyzed by the cold certainty of their words. I tried to move, to run, but my body felt heavy. Every instinct told me to flee, but my feet wouldn't respond. The town had a grip on me now, a grip I couldn't break free from. And then, just as the final seconds ticked away, just as the hands of the clock came within a hair's breadth of 3:17, their voices came again. Louder this time. "Jack, there's no getting out." This was the last known record of Jack's experience, buried deep within a 4chan thread that someone had tried and failed to erase. His words lingered like a ghost in the machine, a warning lost in the depths of the internet. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest as I stared at the figures. Their smiles widened, their bloodshot eyes locking onto mine, and then I saw him, the younger one. His face was like the others, frozen in that unnatural grin, but his eyes, they were different, less faded, less hollow, almost familiar, almost human. My breath stopped as I realized where I'd seen him before, in the missing persons posters, the grainy photo, the desperate pleas from a family who had long given up hope. It was Jack, the Jack from the forums, the Jack who had written those final frantic words, the Jack who had vanished just like the others. The clock ticked. 3:17 a.m. Their voices came again, louder now, echoing in the stillness. "You're next." The words weren't just a warning, they were a promise. A promise that had been made to Jack, and to who knows how many others before him. And now, it was my turn. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but my feet were rooted to the ground. The town had claimed me, just as it had claimed Jack, just as it would claim anyone foolish enough to seek its secrets. And as the darkness closed in, I understood. The town wasn't just stuck in time, it was alive, hungry, waiting for more to join it. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, and I felt it, the pull, the inevitability. My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward the figures, toward Jack, toward the grinning, pale-eyed things that had been waiting for you to join them.